Okay, it looks like we are live, and I'm gonna see if if I messed up something here since had a scheduled we had a scheduled broadcast and have decided to just go a completely different way um, with it. I know us who does that.
Never.
We do that. We do that. We did that. Let me see. Do I have I think I had a description box here. Here's hoping. I'll check for it after the broadcast. Anyway, hello everybody.
Hello.
Hi. Let me see who we have in the room. Checking to see. I'm actually not sure. Anyway, hi everybody. I am Jill. I am one half of Dahlia Law Group.
I'm Alicia. I'm the other half of Dahlia Law Group.
Hey, hey, hey. And if it's your first time with us, this is our Wednesday Legacy live stream. We come on every Wednesday at 12:30 Pacific Standard Time, and we talk about the issues of legacy and how we can address them. Honestly, Alicia and I are both lawyers in Oakland, California. We run a practice called Dahlia Law Group, and the focus of our practice is legacy and estate planning, probate, and litigation related to those areas. And the reason that we do this work is because we see ourselves in the future. We see Black people in the future. We see women in the future. We see trans, queer, non-binary. Yes, we even see poor people in the future. Yes, not that we are wishing for a world where poverty exists. That's not so at all. But it is our view and belief that just because people are differently resourced does not mean that their access to the tools that are important to legacy should be different. So we were originally scheduled to have a conversation today about probate. And we decided to go in a different direction because it is election time. There's lots of talk about the election. And we got a request from a viewer who happens to be my sister. Shout out to Dahnyel. Thank you very much. To have an episode on political issues, and we decided to take up that request and to focus this conversation on how to approach your ballot and what it means to be an informed voter and some practical tools for how you can do that, because enfranchisement and exercising your vote in an informed way is what? A legacy issue.
Necessary.
It is a legacy issue. It is absolutely necessary. So I just want to double check a couple of technological things here before we get down to the nitty gritty.
Is the green light on?
It is.
X.
What I'm not sure about is whether whether our stream is actually streaming directly to our channel or not, because we decided to switch up this conversation very much on the fly. And so, so I want to make sure that that we've done all the technological things right to make sure that it can that everybody can access it.
Yeah.
So bear with us for just a moment here while we sort that out.
Which is good news in and of itself, because if you're here and bearing with us, that means we did it right.
Yeah, except I can't tell if anybody is here with us, friend. I have no idea. I am I am speaking positively on the assumption that
So, you know.
there are people here and that they can see us, but don't be too confident in my in my knowledge on the point today.
I believe in yes.
Oh goodness, that's so funny. Okay.
I can see it on my YouTube.
Okay. Perfect.
Oop, sorry, commercial.
I was gonna say, what was that?
No, I have
Um,
my iPad here and clicked, and I could see the little tile that says we're live and the outfits match. So I was like, that's us.
that's us.
Oh,
Yeah, it does help that I wrapped my hair today.
very cute.
Is it? Thanks. Yeah,
That fabric.
I had to wash it the other night, and so I just have two braids. I just have two braids up, and so today I just decided I was like, you know what? I have not wrapped my hair in a while. I will do that. I wore a head wrap like this pretty much like all throughout law school. Okay, so I'm getting feedback that other people cannot see us. So I don't know.
Lisa liked it. What does liking it mean?
Okay, so
Lisa can
Lisa
see
can
it.
see us. Okay, then never mind. Um, okay. Well, hi, Lisa. Okay.
No, why can't Shauna see us?
This is hilarious because we are off platform trying to figure out whether people can see us. Hey Naomi, if you can see us, will you say word? I see that you're on your phone, but I don't know if that means that you can see us or not. Um,
Or if you're on the phone doing something completely different.
I think we have enough confirmation that we are visible. So let's go ahead because I also don't want to hold other people up, right? Like we're like 7 minutes in at this point.
Yeah.
We're like, is it working? So
What
anyway,
y'all doing over there?
this is a welcome to a life in progress. Now, you all know, for those of you who have been here with us before, for those of you for whom this is not your first time, you know good and well that these internet grannies have some issues with the technologies. Like I'm pointing at both of us. And
That's
so
my at all of us
right.
point.
It is our great it is our great privilege and accomplishment to be able to say that we got this live stream up and running because when I tell you it took a long time and
Thank you.
several gray hairs to get it figured out. So anyway, thank you for your indulgence and thank you for your grace. Thank you for being here. For those of you who are just joining us, about we're talking about another legacy issue. It is just not probate today. So for those of you who were just able to who just joined us, we are talking about dun, 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 how to approach your ballot so that you can be an informed voter. This is not a geographically restricted conversation. Yes, it is absolutely a pivot from episode 19, which will be talking about probate. We will get back to that topic. We absolutely will. But today, in response to a viewer request, the viewer is my sister, Dahnyel, who asked that we have a conversation about political topics, and so we honored that request, took it up, and we are going to talk about how to approach your ballot. This is not meant to be a partisan conversation. You may or may not get some inclination of our political leanings as a result of this, or frankly, any conversation that you have with us. We are not sorry. We are absolutely human. Our personal beliefs and views are actually why we do this work. It's the reason this law firm was even formed. And so we don't make any attempts to separate ourselves or to fracture ourselves in any way. But we're also not going to beat you over the head with our political views. This is not a political view conversation. So, oh, yay. People. Okay, so Naomi.
Offline for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Naomi can see us. Lisa can see us. Nikki's here. Hey, girl. Hey. Quinora is here. Shauna's here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We put some resources already in the description box. I will make sure that those are accessible. Like I said, we do okay with the technology when we've planned it. This was a very short notice pivot. So so you know.
You want to see real comedy. You see us trying to figure out how to do two at once.
Oh goodness. Oh goodness. That was yesterday. And when I tell you it was a mess, you don't know what a mess is until that. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into it. There is a particular structure. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm moving on. Alicia is saying stop. Please just interrupt. You know good and well.
I was raising my hand.
Yeah, don't do that. Just interrupt. You know who you're dealing with here.
I have a question. How are you?
That is a great question. Thank you for holding me and holding us to our standard of being whole and human first. So,
Lillian.
for those who might be new here, we every single Wednesday at 12:30 we start the live stream with whatever we come in with, but also with the question
of life.
Yeah, with the question of how are you? And we're really asking. We'll ask each other, but we're also asking you, how are you? Alicia, I am well. And importantly, it is well with me. So both of those things. I am, I think I might have said on a previous episode that I was feeling some distance from my movement practice and sort of just getting curious about being in my body and sort of moving it and what that practice is and means to me. And so yeah, I have been able to access some of my movement practice and to really lovingly and with curiosity and softness to really just be able to appreciate being in my body. And so that's one of the many things that I am grateful for, and I am well, in part because of. So, how are you?
I like it. I'm all right. Yeah, I am a little running around crazy bit because it's a super busy, dense week that just requires a lot of prep, but doing what I can. So I'm excited because right now my house smells like chili because even though it was 1:00 in the morning when I did it, got the stuff in the crock pot. So I got to wake up to the smell of, ooh, there's going to be real food today.
You made the chili?
Randomness.
Which one did you make?
It's a hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hybrid. So
wait, can I just interrupt and ask really quickly for confirmation? Yeah. What is our friendship policy on sending chilies in the mail? How do we?
If I could figure out how to do it, like I'm thinking if I could put it in the Ziploc bag and freeze it and then overnight it, like in the Ziploc with the ice packs and
Mm-hmm,
whatnot,
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think it could
mm-hmm.
get there fast enough to still stay fresh enough.
You know what? We
Because, I
used to
mean,
send ribs to my. We used to send barbecue ribs to my uncle
no
that
kidding.
way. Yeah, there was
Heck,
dry ice involved. I'll call my grandmother and find out how we did that.
yeah. I'm in
Anyway.
for that. I'm willing to explore. So, yeah. So it's little random stuff like that where it seems kind of nutty, but I love and appreciate all of it and it being part of my day. So, yes, I was up making chili at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I was late getting to my chair for the live stream because I needed to put lotion on my toes because I couldn't be out on these live stream streets with ashy toes, which I know is utterly ridiculous. And so you get all of me.
Mm-hmm. 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 Got it.
Like I'm sitting there going like, "Oh, let me get this. Wait, ding dong! It's a video that's like not even your whole chest up, but you were like stressing and late because your toes can't be
But it's
ashy."
but it's distracting. If your toes are ashy, isn't it Oh gosh.
I'm sure there are people out there that understand this ridiculous.
Oh goodness. Okay. So
So
that's
let it be known I never take myself too seriously.
right. Oh goodness. Oh goodness. Okay. Okay. Oh, Nikki says that's exactly how you send friends food. So I think that
Awesome.
our plan is, or at least our loose plan is on the right track. It's like that's exactly how you send friends food. Oh, and Lisa has an episode request.
Oh, yes,
She
bring it.
says, I would like to formally request a future episode on ensuring that there will be dancing at my funeral, fun and celebratory dancing, and everybody must be dressed to stunt. You know what?
Can
Consider
do.
it done.
Can do.
Consider it done. We will absolutely talk about memorial planning. 100%. You got it, friend. You got it.
I will
Lisa
fill
also
you in
said,
on my plan because it
right.
is in the papers.
Lisa also said, "You're good. You're good, Alicia." She says she barely lotions her elbows for Zoom calls. I cannot.
You all
I
know me. You know I'm
cannot.
extra at all times, so I just can't help it.
You're not extra. You're just the right amount of much. Just the right amount of much. Whatever it is.
Thanks.
I love it. All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these ballots. Everybody by now is receiving ballots if you don't have them in your hands already. What's on your ballot might be,
If you were doing vote by mail.
yeah, if you're doing vote by mail, but also access to what the ballot measures are and what's actually
Yeah,
on the ballot is published
for sure.
everywhere at this
Yes.
point, even if you don't have the actual physical ballot in your hand. One thing that I would like to start with before we even get to our outline is a reminder. If you are somewhere in your immigration journey, this reminder is for our folks who are on their immigration journey. If you are on your immigration journey, please, please, please go back and look at the very first Legacy X conversation that we had with Bianca Jordan. It's you'll see it on our channel as Legacy X Immigration, and you will very much want to know the information that's in there, not to withhold the bottom line for you. The topic that we're talking about in that episode is how voting, if you're on your immigration journey and you are not yet a U.S. citizen, how voting can actually disqualify you from ever obtaining citizenship. So please, please, please look at that episode if you or someone you love is somewhere on your immigration journey and you have questions about how or whether you should be participating in this election cycle. So the first way to approach your ballot is to protect your right to vote. That's the first thing. That's the first thing to do. And one of the ways you protect your right to vote is by making sure that you are not voting when that right has not yet ripened for you, because it could be a disqualifier in the future. So let's talk through our outline here a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about and how we're going to approach it.
Yes.
So I'll let Alicia do the summary while I grab some of the comments.
So I don't know why I thought you were going to say while I grab some water, like you're just
I
getting
do
me
have
up
some.
and go.
I have some. Oh, you mean like I was just going to get up and walk away?
Right. Like, wait. So, yeah, so our summary today, like Jill said, this is a definitely nonpartisan conversation. And we're not going to tell you who to vote, how to vote, and frankly, we can't, because this one is also one of the few times you'll hear us talking about something that's not California specific.
Right.
So what we hope to give you by the end of this conversation is some tools that you can use when reading and analyzing whatever is on your ballot. So just you have kind of some plot points to be using as you look at and consider it, so that number one, you can be an informed voter, and number two, that you can be confident in your informed voter choices and knowing how you're doing, what you're doing, why you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing with your ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so first thing that we're going to talk about is how to approach your ballot. Like that's going to be the sort of the nitty-gritty specifics. And when we get into the specifics, that's where we'll start. But as sort of a foundational layer, one thing I'd like to offer is that informed voting is one part of a process. It is part of a process of your civic engagement. Okay, and so I want to create that context, and it is not the end in and of itself. So once you vote, your job is not done. It is just a means, right, to achieving some of your other civic goals, right, and making sure that your voice on civic issues is heard. Having the ability to vote carries with it the responsibility to make your vote an informed vote. You're not just voting for yourself. You and I both know we all have cousins, friends, families, colleagues, and associates who either won't vote or can't. And those are not throwaway people. And so when you vote, you are voting for them too. All right. So not to put pressure on your vote, but not to not put pressure on it either. Okay. Because this is a place where that's critically important. And so most of us come into the vote with a ballot. I can't think of any place or state where you don't have a ballot. So let's talk about the ballot itself. When you're looking at ballot measures, we'll talk a little bit about candidates separately, but when you're looking at ballot measures, so these are laws, these are constitutional amendments, these are bond issues, these are referendums, like that sort of stuff. A ballot measure is some sort of law that is going to impact your life in the place where you are voting. So that could be statewide, it could be federal, right? You could be voting on federal laws. Not usually, like we typically don't see that at a federal level. We are typically voting on candidates, right, to represent our interests in establishing laws or executing laws or things like that. But anyway, it could be federal, it could be state, it could be local. You are mostly going to see ballot measures in state and local elections, excuse me, or on the state and local parts of your ballot, and they may show up in a few different ways. At the state level, and this is, I'm speaking from my experience in California, but this is going to apply to other places. It might have different words, but in California, it may be a measure, which is just going to be a statute, right? A statute is a law that's written down in a law book, right? It could be a measure. It could be a bond. A bond is a way of raising money, and Alicia will explain a little bit more about that. It could be a constitutional amendment. Everybody knows that the United States has a constitution. Well, each state within the United States has its own constitution, and constitutional amendments are typically harder to pass and harder to overturn. So there's that. It could be in California, we have a referendum process. And so for states where, for other states that also have referendum processes, it could be that. And a referendum, I will talk about a little bit more specifically in a second, but it's basically a way of saying, do we really have to do that? Are you sure? So, at the local level, you may have ordinances, which are local statutes, essentially, right? And you're not going to have a constitutional amendment or anything like that at the local level. States may have charters. Cities or municipalities may have charters, which is kind of like a local constitution. But typically, I don't think you're going to see too many. I haven't seen too many charter issues on a ballot. Not in California. Have you, Alicia?
No, but I could see how it's possible that it
there.
could happen. And I think it's important to note that when we say local, like that can come in a few different layers of local, that you could have all of these things. So it could be at your county level, or in some states where they call county parish. So that could be a local issue. It could be at the city level.
Right.
But then in certain cities, they even have districts or neighborhoods. And so it could come up there. And so you might be in a particular library district, for instance. And so it could be like a library district bond measure. So they can get really, really minute for the number of people that are weighing in on a particular issue.
Right. So I promised the people that we would explain, or that you would explain, what a bond measure is. So
let me get at people what they want.
Please and thank you.
So what a bond measure is like Jill said, it is a way of raising money. And so typically when you see a bond on the ballot, it is likely I've never seen a federal bond on a ballot. I'll say that. So it's likely going to be state level, and it may also be local level. So thinking about where I just gave the example of, for instance, a library district, school bond measures are also pretty common on ballots as well. And so with a bond, what that is whatever governing body is asking the question that is being presented on your ballot, they are trying to raise money. And so the way that they raise money with bonds is it works very much like savings bonds, where you give me money now and I will pay you back with interest later for the opportunity to use your money. And so when we have the bond measures on the ballot, what it is typically presented as is it's going to be authorization to sell bonds of a certain amount. So, one that is on the California ballot, for instance, this year, it is they're asking for authorization to sell, I think it's $5 billion in bonds. And so it is this money that comes in when we sell those bonds is earmarked for a particular purpose of what we are going to use it for. And it's also going to say how long that bond is, which means this is how long we have to pay it back. So it really is like it works like a loan, essentially. And so, but it's a loan that instead of getting it from one individual person or bank like you would if you just went and got a mortgage per se, it is we're selling tickets to the loan. So everybody put your $5 in like a raffle ticket, but you're guaranteed to get something back on this bond when it does what's called maturing. And so when it matures, it means if it's a 30-year bond measure, then it says, okay, we are going to sell this $5 billion in bonds, and we know that in 30 years, we are going to have to pay back the 5 billion plus whatever the interest amount is, because one of the things with bonds why people will use that as an investment is it's a guaranteed interest rate. You know exactly how much you're getting back. So if it's a I buy, bless you, if
Thank
I
you.
buy a $100 bond and I am guaranteed that in 30 years I am going to get $250 back, that means on your bond measure on your ballot, they're going to tell you exactly how much this is overall going to cost for the repayment of the bond amount plus the interest amount.
Yeah. If you have questions about that or anything, just pop them in the chat box and we will cover them. Excuse me. I also told you that I would tell you a little bit more about what referendums are. And in California, we have our state has a referendum process, and that's basically where the state legislature, so the sort of the Congress of the state of California, it's called the legislature, right? It consists of the assembly, which is sort of like the House of Representatives, and the California State Senate. This is the lawmaking body of the state of California. These are the folks who we elect, right, on our ballots when we vote to the legislature in order to make laws on behalf of the members of the state. Well, sometimes the legislature will make a decision, right? They will make a law, they will draft a law, and that law, kind of like there's one right now, actually, there's one on our ballot right now. A bill was passed by the California Senate, and it was prevented from going into effect because somebody wanted a referendum on it. And what that essentially means is that before that Senate bill could go into effect, somebody gathered up some signatures and got some momentum and enough support to get this referendum on the ballot. And what the referendum is asking, and all referenda ask, I think, in the state of California, is should this law go into effect? Should we, the voters of the state directly, we're asking the voters of the state directly to say whether this law that the legislature is intending to put into effect, should it actually be put into effect, right? And so that's what a referendum is. It really is do we have to do that? Or are you sure about that?
So,
I mean, I guess it could work the
hold on,
opposite.
wait a minute, clause.
Right. And so the legislature, of course, is a representative body. So all of the California senators, all of the California assembly people represent various portions of the state and the residents of those areas of the state that fall within their jurisdiction, right? And so Rather than, a referendum is saying, rather than rely on that representative decision, we want this to go to the voters directly to say, so that we can say, yeah, we're good with that, or nah, we're not good with that decision that you made. So, so that's what a referendum is, and we actually do have one on our ballot right now. Constitutional amendments are exactly what they sound like. They change a constitution by either adding to it, taking from it, right? Adding a provision to it, taking a provision from it, or changing a provision that already exists in the Constitution. I think that that's probably just about all of the types of things you can find on the ballot. So let's talk a little bit about how to approach it. Like, how do we actually decide what our vote is going to be on a particular measure? One of the first things that I would ask, very first things that I would ask is, do you understand it? That is thing one. Do you understand it? Do you understand what it is? Is it a bond measure? Is it a constitutional amendment? Is it a statute? Is it a referendum? Is it a local ordinance? Like, do you understand who it applies to? Do you understand what it is intended to do? Like, does it actually make enough sense to you? And here I think it's worthwhile. You can tell I feel strongly about this because I'm adjusting myself in my seat. This one. The reason I'm asking, do you understand it? Do I understand it? Is because I need to know if I understand it well enough to be governed by it. Because whatever the answer to this question is that's being raised by the measure, do we enact this law? Do we not enact this law? I am governed by that response. Do I understand it well enough to be governed by it? Do I understand it well enough to hold accountable the folks who are charged with making sure that this law is going to be carried out according to its terms? And if I don't understand it, or if I don't understand it well enough, then does that affect how I vote? That's a question that only you can answer, but I believe that it is a question that we all have to ask as we approach our ballots. Does that make sense to you? Do I understand it? Is question number one. And we can talk about, and actually we will talk about just now, some ways to sort of get in to some understanding, right, and to affect our understanding.
Yeah. I think one thing I would add to that in the do I understand it is also to just look at the whole ballot and to not look at things on a micro level on the first pass. And what makes me think of that is there was on our California ballot, I want to say it might have been the 2016 ballot, but what ended up happening was there were two competing measures on the ballot.
Oh yeah.
That like one said, if we do this, then this is going to pass. And there's a whole nother one that said, well, the opposite.
They were in direct conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
one of them, it was like akin to one of them saying, I think all lights should be green. And the other one said, I think all lights should not be green. They were in that type of direct conflict.
And so it became you had to weigh up, well, what does it mean if I put yes on this one and no on this one? Or if I put yes on both, am I canceling out my vote on the issue as a whole? And that one is particularly, it goes to the how we, like that next step of do I understand it, is how did it get here is an important piece of question to ask. So for instance, in California, we have things that can be on our ballot that are legislatively placed, but we also have things that can be citizen placed as well. So, legislatively placed means that the legislature has said, we want the people of the state to weigh in on this. So, we are going to put this on the next ballot as a ballot measure. Should we pass this law, or are you okay with this law? Is what is happening there. You can also have the ones that are people placed. And I'm saying people placed because right now the official word for it is escaping my mind, but don't charge that to me. You follow me here.
In California, we have an initiative process where where voters can request that laws be made. So there is a lot of power for direct action in the state of California. So voters can directly request through this initiative process that a law that is drafted by voters or whoever is sponsoring the thing actually be put on the ballot. So not only can the legislature create laws, but the citizens or the voters of the state of California can directly create laws.
Yes, thank you.
I got you.
So, with that initiative process, the way that that happens, how the people can request that it be on a ballot is you collect a certain number of signatures to get it qualified as a ballot proposal, and then that thing is on the ballot. So that is one of the pieces of analysis to look at as who put this here? Like, why am I even looking at this? Why am I weighing in on it? Because that alone might be something that helps guide your decision making in it. So when I think about what Jill said, our legislature, and that is a representative body, when we have voted for the people that represent our particular district to go and do the lawmaking and do the job, then it raises a question for me in my brain of why are those people that I sent there to do that's what we pay them for, now bringing this question to me to weigh in on it before they do something? Because if it's there as a legislatively placed proposition, then that's different than the referendum that Jill talked about. The referendum means we've made a decision already, and we're putting a pause in there to say, do you agree with that decision? If it's a legislatively placed proposition, then what that means is we have not decided ourselves. We are just giving it to you, the people, to decide what do we do with this.
Yeah, I mean the legislature might not have any involvement at all with the initiative process. So an initiative may come about because the legislature has not acted, right? This might be something that people think is important, is an important way for the laws of the jurisdiction to be changed, but the legislature, which gets to decide what its agenda is for the legislative season. So kind of like we're seeing, we're seeing right now, there is on a national level, there is a Supreme Court nominee who is being vetted by, or who's already been nominated, but who is being confirmed or going through that confirmation process in the U.S. Senate. Well, the Senate gets to decide its schedule and sort of what things it will do or won't do, right? So whether or not it's going to be taking up business about other things, right? Or this is a decision that the Senate gets to make. And so similarly, in the state of California, the California legislature gets to decide what it's going to take up. Actually, each house of the California legislature gets to decide what it's going to take up. And it just might not get to something that you or I think is important. And so one of the ways that we are able to respond to that is to say, well, forget it. They didn't get to it. So we can do that ourselves. Or it might not be something that's on the legislature's radar at all. It's just something that the people think is important. So.
Yep. So that's one thing to think about when you're thinking about it, is who put it here. Then another thing as you're reading it is to think about what does it mean for this thing to get a yay versus a nay? Like, how many votes does it even take? That can be a thing that you want to be thinking about of if this is just a majority vote that's required or if it's a 2/3 vote. There are certain types of measures that you might see that might even require that it be presented to the people more than once. And so thinking about that, because some of those things that may come into play is how much of an impact is there going to be if we have to keep revisiting this thing, or what happens in the meantime of it all. So that's another important thing to consider.
Yeah. Another thing
Then,
I would say before we move too far away from this is when it sort of relates to the question of who put this thing on the ballot. Excuse me. I think that this is a good place to put the question of who spent what money on this, right? Who is in support of it? Who is against it? And the reason I think that is useful in approaching your ballot is because it'll kind of give you a sense of, I mean, it'll be an incomplete sense, obviously, but it'll kind of give you a sense of the context, right? There is this concept of dark money, right, that comes up quite a lot, like the invisible, the millions and billions of dollars that show up in election politics from seemingly invisible sources, that are trying to advance particular agenda, right? There is that. There is also other money, though. So, for example, one of the measures that is on the California state ballot right now, has, I mean, relatively speaking, it's not the most money that we've ever seen spent on spent on a ballot measure. But here was a really interesting thing, or at least a really interesting thing to me, that showed up when I started looking into the money. The folks who were for the ballot measure spent the money that was spent for the ballot measure was mostly spent by individuals. It was mostly individual contributions that made up the money that, or at least the money that's reported, that is backing that ballot measure. The money that is against the ballot measure is mostly spent by organizations and institutions. And the reason this was important to me is because this particular measure has to do with the question of bail. And so, to me, knowing that individuals with, whatever their individual contributions were, and I think I was able to see information on like the average contribution among the individuals. But anyway, knowing that individuals were mostly in favor of this and institutions were mostly contributing money against this on the topic of bail, that was an important thing for me to know, and it did affect my analysis on how I might vote on that particular ballot measure. And while I'm on the topic, this information, sort of this drill down information, if you're in California, Voter's Edge is a really great resource for nonpartisan information about ballot measures, including, and also candidates as well, including the money, including the narrative of, because people and institutions get to submit narrative statements in favor of, against, all of that, and also endorsements and that sort of thing. So you can really drill down into the information and actually get to the text of the measure itself very easily if that is useful to you. A nationwide tool that does a very similar thing is called Ballotpedia, Ballotpedia, and it does a very similar thing. I think that we already have those resources in the description box, but if not, I will make sure that that those are there. So this question about who is for and who is against can actually be really useful in informing your vote. One of the most expensive ballot measures on our current ballot, almost $1 billion with a B, billion dollars. It was like 97, $98 million plus, was spent on this. And most of that money was spent by organizations and institutions in favor of this particular measure. And I mean, it was
And
astonishing.
the commercials and Daily Mail on it are endless.
And so one of the questions,
Endless.
yeah, one of the questions I have is why so much money?
What's
Like,
going on?
who needs to spend that much money in order to convince folks that this is, that this is a beneficial thing? And so while that question is not in and of itself enough to make my decision on how to vote on this ballot measure, it does give me a direction to kind of focus some of my other questions and thoughts around. Because I don't know about you, but some of these ballot measures are so thick and so like, huh, that I feel like I need some direction to kind of guide my analysis. So anyway, adding on to the how did it get here? Who put this on the ballot? I would also sort of put together with that who is supporting this thing, and who is against it. And one of the ways that it is one of the readily apparent ways that we can see that a thing gets support like this is in who's spending what money on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for indulging that interruption.
No, I think it's important, and it really is a who put it on here, because similarly on one of the California measures of the money that was spent, it's like, in comparison, you're talking about almost $1 billion. This one only has like 5.5 million,
Right.
but 5.4 million of that 5.5 million, one person
One
spent that
person.
money. One person spent it.
One
And is
person.
really, so what that means is, yes, it is there through the initiative process with the signature collection, but what that tells you is one person did all of the financing. And so, something that kind of stands out when we talk about the financing of that is, for those ballot signatures, for some of them, it might be a grassroots, like, we're out here talking to our people, collecting signatures, and people are in support of this being on the ballot. But in reality, there are a lot of signature collectors on these petitions that are paid to do
Hmm.
that. For them, they don't give a tinker's darn
Or
about
they
what
might
it
not.
is.
Yeah.
They're collecting a paycheck. And so what that means is you got one person that is writing paychecks to these people to just get the numbers right, to get enough people to sign off on it being on the ballot. And frankly, it is offensive to me that some of what they count on is low voter turnout
Hmm.
and people not really doing their homework and paying attention to be informed. So if we can make it sound sexy enough or sound like a good idea where people don't pay attention to the details, we might be able to pull this thing over on the people and get what it is that we want. That is not the way that our political process was ever designed. That is not the way that it should be. And so that's why these conversations are important, for you to hear it, to tell other people, and to spread the word so that we can have more voter engagement and more informed voters weighing in on these things so that that can stop.
Right. And one of the things too that not to harp too much on this money thing, but there's so much money in politics that I also think that it's a little hard to harp on it too much, honestly, just given how much money is involved. But another thing that money question really pokes at is sort of a little bit of a future view, or at least some gives me some curiosity into the future about how the law will be implemented, right? And things that relate to it could be implemented, right? So if this one person, for in the one person funded this initiative example, if this one person is able to throw around enough money to have the initiative placed on the ballot, then when it comes time to protecting it in the legislature, to enforcing it in the legislature, where sort of lobbying, really comes into effect, well, there's the likelihood that there's enough money for effective lobbying and that sort of thing, is actually pretty high, isn't it? Like if there was enough, it's not always true that if there's enough money to get it on the ballot, because some grassroots organizations really struggle to get enough resources to get a thing on the ballot. But it is one of the questions that I ask, and that I find useful to think about. Some folks don't really like to nerd out on this sort of thing as much as we do, and that's totally understandable, and it's also acceptable. One of the things that we're asking, though, is that every single voter find their way of engaging with their ballot in an empowered way. So it may, and an informed way, right? So the money stuff might not even be a question that interests you. To that, I would say, I don't know how, but okay, right? Like I don't have any judgment for that, but find a way that makes sense to you. And maybe it's with another question. One of the other questions that I think is also very important is this measure in a vehicle that I think is appropriate for what it's trying to achieve? So, for example, in California, we might have on the ballot a measure that is designed to set aside a particular amount of money for creeks and streams in California parks, for cleaning up or preserving creeks and streams in California parks. We might have that. And I might be all for that until I learn that it is in the form of a constitutional amendment. And that this goes back to knowing what is it, right? A question I have to ask myself in order to be an informed voter, or I might ask myself in order to be an informed voter, is, do I want to budget through the Constitution? Do I think that constitutional amendment is the best way to have the budgetary process go? Or is that something that I want to have the legislature to have more power over, allocating the funds? Or do I want that to be automatically allocated, which in a constitutional amendment, it is going to be automatically allocated, right? The legislature doesn't have any independent control over constitutional amendments. They get those the way that the Constitution presents them. I'm not saying that is a good or a bad thing. Frankly, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, in my view. But it is a question that helps me to inform my vote. So I might not ask myself all of these questions, but using some of these questions to sort of to have an entry point, to have that conversation with myself, or with Alicia, or with the folks around me, to really inform my vote is really important. So I think, is it ideal that we would ask all of these questions and have the most thorough and complete analysis? Absolutely, yes. And if you have bandwidth or can create bandwidth or capacity in your life to do that, please do it. And it's a reality that you may not. And so figuring out a way to have an informed engagement with your ballot is really sort of what I'm encouraging here.
Yeah, and sometimes that may look like if nerding out on this is not your thing, then what it may look like is finding some trusted sources and resources that break it down in pieces that give you enough of a sense of it that you feel informed about it.
Yeah.
So, another resource that we have, if we don't already, it's going to be there in the resources list, is the League of Women Voters is a place where, for instance, similar to what Joe mentioned for Voters Edge, where they just give you a nonpartisan approach of here are the pros, here are the cons, here are some of the highlights, here's a summary of what this thing says, and then here's the full text of it. Because sometimes that's what you want to do is read what does it say. That's part of that engagement process of what is it that you're asking for here. And then another point on what Jill said earlier, like way back in the conversation, is your engagement does not stop with your vote. And so some of the things that you're going to be looking for in that language where you're assessing what this thing is and what it's asking to be done here is what is the accountability measure that's built into it so that we can verify that you are actually doing what it is that you say you're going to be doing. So if it's a bond measure that says this money is earmarked for this specific purpose, what's the checkpoint that we get to see? Where's the transparency that we can see that that money is actually being used for that purpose? Another thing that you might be looking for is if there are ways to divert funds from something else, because sometimes that will be in there, whereas it's earmarked for this, but we've got a clause in here that if this thing happens, then the municipality can, for instance, take that money and use it to fill a deficit that they have somewhere else along the way. So while we might be voting for this money to go to the library, if they need the money for the streets, then they can take it and use it for the streets. So those are some of the things that you're going to be reading for. But totally respect that sometimes you don't want to nerd out on it. Sometimes you don't have the time to. So an example of a way of kind of getting it broken down where it's maybe I need to nerd out on some, but not all. And so how do I prioritize my nerdery?
Exactly.
Is one of the things we participated in a couple of weeks ago is a forum that is available on YouTube. It was hosted by Imani Community Church and Faith in Action East Bay, where we went through all of the California state propositions and gave just the highlights of some of these things that we're talking about for each of those measures. So to give you a sense of how it is, like we're hitting the highlights of this thing, is I think when we spoke, it was about an hour and 15-ish or so minutes
Oh, it
for
was
the
longer
part
than
that
that.
was us.
Oh no, it was
Just
longer
for
than
the
that.
part that was us.
It was an hour and a half easily.
No, the whole video is an hour and a half, and we weren't the whole thing. Yeah, so
It
it's like
felt
about
like
an
it
hour,
was.
15, 20 minutes. But that gives you a sense. There were, I think we covered 17 positions in that hour and a half-ish time.
We were
And
talking.
so,
We must have been talking fast.
like that Mighty Machines man on the commercial.
Cause we covered
But
a
one of
lot
the
of
things,
ground. I
yeah,
mean, like a
we
lot.
covered a lot of ground because
Yeah,
it was the state measures plus county measures for our two
for two
most local
counties. Yeah.
counties to the groups that asked us to speak at this thing. And so what it might look like is, all right, I'm gonna watch that presentation because for some of them you might get a quick sense of like, yeah, I'm okay with that, or no, I don't like that, or wait a minute, I have some questions about this. And so then we presented, if you want to take a deeper dive on this thing, here are the resources for that. And so that might be what it looks like, because some things are pretty easy. Should we push baby strollers into the street at will? I'm going to vote no. Like, I don't need to get too deep into the details of that. Bad idea. So I'm going to move on. But then there are going to be some measures that are more nuanced that you might want to take a deeper dive in looking at the actual legislative text, the summaries, what people are saying, because when you have those statements that you'll find with some of those resources like Ballotpedia and Voters Edge, you're going to get the official statements, and then you're going to get statements from stakeholders in this thing. So, for instance, if we're passing a local ordinance, you might have an official statement from the city attorney or the county manager that's really giving their take, because they're the ones that are going to have to really engage with this thing if it passes, or if it doesn't pass, either way. And so seeing what they're saying about it is going to be useful to help you with your analysis for where do you land with this particular thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think that another question that sort of naturally comes from this is, what's the effect of it? Right? What is the effect of this measure passing? And also, what is the effect if it doesn't pass? Right? One of the things that we know for sure is that lawmaking, legislating, the process of elections is not, it is rife with compromises, right? And so sometimes we have to look at, if this thing passes, is it going to do more harm than if it fails? If this thing passes, is it going to do more good if it fails? Even just going into it with the idea that this is not a perfect thing. This is the thing that I am looking at is an imperfect thing. So what is the impact of this imperfect thing passing or not passing? And a very important question to me is, what does love require here? What does love require? Love for myself, love for my family, love for my neighbors. Because we look at these ballot measures and we look at, they are presented institutionally, right? And so there are, there are any number of henceforths and wherebys and all of that and all of that stuff. But it is people, like the consequences of these ballot measures and these elections generally, the consequences are borne on people. The implementation is through people. The beneficiaries are people. A lot of times, but a lot of times the beneficiaries can also be corporations and and other entities, and that's a thing to be mindful of. But mostly what I'm saying is that the brunt of whatever the impact of this thing is going to be felt by people. And I'm a people. You're a people. The folks I love are people. And so what does love require? Because ultimately that is what I want to be visited upon the lives of the people that I care about. So what are the impacts? What happens if it passes? What happens if it doesn't pass? And really letting that inform my vote. And frankly, if that's the only question you ask, I'm good with that.
Yeah, that is an informed vote.
Yeah.
If you've thought through that. I think is the last point, because I know we have to go.
Yeah.
Because we can nerd out about this, it also means we can talk about it forever. But we understand that that's not going to work. But my last point I would say is, don't feel like you're in this process alone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to ask questions and talk to people about it. And that's why I'm glad that we are having this conversation now, because it gives you time to do that. Because sometimes there might be something on there that you don't necessarily understand. And so talking to somebody to get some clarification on it is going to be really useful. Because I'm thinking about, it was on the 2008 ballot, like told you, nerds. Can't help it. It's who we are.
Oh, I was furious about I know what you're about to say, and I was furious about it. Go ahead.
And so on our California 2008 ballot of an example of talking to people and helping form an understanding about what's happening here is we had Proposition 8 on the ballot that was the first time that same-sex marriage was presented on the California ballot.
Mm-hmm.
What ended up happening was it was so poorly worded on the ballot that people essentially thought they were voting in the reverse of what they were actually intending to vote because of the way this ballot measure was written. And so I can recall having conversations with people. It was over Thanksgiving. And
Yes,
so it's
ma'am.
after this thing has passed and talking about it and hearing people's thought processes about why they voted the way they did. And dang near getting kicked out of my own family Thanksgiving because I'm like about to be on the table. Like, that is not what it said at all. That was not what was being asked.
Nope.
And to hear that people just didn't have an understanding of what it was, even though these were smart people, educated people, they were reading this thing, but because they didn't have any conversation about it, didn't fully grasp what the question was. And
Yep.
so talk to people. So having conversations with folks to say, this is what I'm seeing. Is this what you're seeing? Or can you read this and tell me if I'm understanding it wrong? Don't be afraid to have those conversations with people and have the dialogue, because that will help you be an informed voter. That will help them be an informed voter. And that helps us all.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Hopefully, this sort of framework conversation is useful to you and to the folks you love as you are considering how you want to vote on both the people who are seeking your trust to hold various, to hold various public offices, all the way from, your local offices up to, up to the U.S. presidency. Hopefully, this framework conversation is even helpful when considering that. Ultimately, folks are asking you to express your faith in their ability and their willingness and their heart and their intention to do the thing that they are asking you to elect them to do. And so hopefully this framework conversation even gives you some thoughts about that. Just a quick note on people on the ballot. I just want to say, and I know that we need to go because this is one of our longer episodes already, but I would like to say, do not overlook your local elections. Local elections are where we vote for people like judges. As we are talking about, some of us are talking about prison reform. We're talking about judicial reform, and and that sort of thing, right? Like, voting on judges is huge. It is such a big deal, and it impacts your day-to-day life no matter where you land on those particular issues. I'm not even concerned about that. I'm saying that these elected positions are where they happen. And I noticed that in some states, judges can campaign with donations and that sort of stuff. And in some states they cannot. Like,
They can
looking,
be partisan.
yeah, some of these questions about how did you get here and who spent what on whom, and one question that we didn't talk about, but I'm just going to throw it in here for free, is, have we been here before? Because you will see things on a ballot that have been on the ballot before, right? And
The
so, if
$1 billion measure.
right, has this issue come up here before? Why are we
Or
talking
has
about
this
this?
person
Right. Has this person been on here? Why are we talking about this again? Right, like that's a relevant question as well. But hopefully these, sort of these questionings and frameworks give you at least a language to have a conversation with yourself and with your ballot, right? About informing your vote. Thank you for indulging the pivot on today. And questions, concerns, if you want to continue the dialogue, Alicia and I are open to maybe doing like an Instagram live thing or something like that in the near future maybe continue this dialogue. The presentation, the conversation that we had that was sponsored and hosted by Imani Community Church in Oakland, California, about the California state ballot measures and the Alameda County and Contra Costa County measures. Those are two local California Bay Area counties. The link to that conversation is in the description box. I don't think that the League of Women Voters is in there, so I'll make that update. If you are a California voter, the slide deck for that presentation is also available. I'll make sure that we have a link to that as well. If there is anything that we can do to support your informed civic engagement, short of telling you how to vote, because we're not going to do that, like that is your sacred trust and you need to decide that for yourself. But short of that, we're happy to help facilitate. Also, if you happen to be a lawyer, there is also a resource for how lawyers can get involved in question answering and being a resource both at a distance and with physical presence at voting stations around the country. So all of that is there. Like I said, I know this was a lengthy episode, but and it was totally a last minute pivot, but it's our live stream, so we get to do that. Yes, go ahead, Alicia.
And just one last note is on some of those resources that we've given, Ballotpedia in particular, it also has people information, not just ballot measures. Yeah. So even though we spent more time talking about the measures side of it, the resources that we provided will also help you with doing your analysis on the people part.
Yep. So thanks you all. How can the people reach us if they need to, Holland?
First, your homework is vote. Be an informed voter. Yes. That's your homework for the week.
Please do it.
How you can reach us is we are here every Wednesday at 12:30 Pacific on the YouTubes. You can also find us on Instagram at Dahnyel Law Group. You can find us on the interwebs at dahyellawgroup.com. You can find us by way of email at DLG, which stands for Dahnyel Law Group, at dahyellawgroup.com, as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. But we don't really check those Instagram or the comments here because, like you can see, we are nerds. And so we would love to engage, love to engage with you and your questions on this topic.
Yes. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. We don't take it for granted. And we will see you back here next week on Wednesday at 12:30 Pacific time, where it is our intention to actually talk about probate. Thanks for this, y'all.